event. Radio Algeria International, our voice in the world.
This is the English service of Radio Algeria International. It's time for the news.
Diplomacy Chief Ahmed Attaf took today part in the opening ceremony of the 24th extraordinary session of the Executive Council of the African Union in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. Algeria has decided in all sovereignty to declare 12 agents working at the French embassy and consulates in Algeria as persona non grata or unwelcome under the supervision of the country's interior ministry, with an obligation to leave the national territory within 48 hours. The United Nations Security Council has held a closed-door meeting on the developments in the situation in Western Sahara, occupied by Morocco since 1975. As the humanitarian situation in Gaza worsens day by day, the Israeli army pursued its attacks on the territory in northern and southern parts, killing several Palestinians. Those were the major developments. Now the full news edition. Good afternoon. The President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune, has appointed Kamer Rizig as Minister of Foreign Trade and Export Promotion in replacement of Mr. Bukhari Mohammed. He has also appointed Mr. Mohammed Bukhari as successor of Mrs. Rabia Kharfi, President of the National Economic, Social and Environment Council. Algeria has decided in all sovereignty to declare 12 agents working at the French embassy and consulates in Algeria persona non grata under the supervision of the country's interior ministry, ordering the obligation to leave the national territory within 48 hours. Ashabikar reports.
A press release from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs has said the decision came after the shocking and ostentatious arrest of a consular officer of a sovereign state accredited in France on the public road on April 8, 2025 by the intelligence services under the supervision of the French Interior Ministry. This disgraceful action, by which the Interior Minister sought to belittle Algeria, was carried out without any consideration for the consular status of this officer, disregarding all diplomatic customs and practices and in flagrant violation of the relevant conventions and treaties. Algeria reiterated that this shameful act is the consequence of the negative, distressing and consistent attitude of the French Interior Minister towards Algeria. Algeria said the French Interior Minister, who excels at immoral tricks for purely personal gains, clearly lacks political discernment. The Algerian Foreign Ministry said by carrying out a crude arrest of a consular officer protected by the immunities and privileges attached to his status and by treating him shamefully and in an undignified way like a thief, the French Interior Minister bears full responsibility for the turn taken by the relations between Algeria and France at a time when they had just begun a phase of appeasement thanks to the telephone conversation between the heads of state of the two countries, which was followed by the visit to Algeria of the French Minister of Foreign Affairs. Algeria reaffirms that any further offensive action by the French Interior Minister will receive on the basis of reciprocity a firm and appropriate response.
The Minister of State in charge of Foreign Affairs, the National Community Abroad and African Affairs, Ahmed Attaf, took part today in the opening ceremony of the 24th extraordinary session of the Executive Council of the African Union in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. Several topics are on the agenda of the extraordinary session relating to the election of vacant posts within the bodies of the African Unions. On the occasion, the Minister of State held talks with some of his African counterparts, during which they exchanged views on the main current issues in Africa. Algeria and Ethiopia have expressed their will to translate their excellent relations in concrete and mutually beneficial economic commitments. More details with Jamal Salmani.
During the Joint Commission meeting co-chaired by Foreign Ministers Ahmed Attaf and Gideon Timotheos, the two sides held the historic ties that unite them and explored new prospects for cooperation. The discussions focused on assessing previous discussions, diversifying areas of cooperation and strengthening business-to-business relations. Cooperation in defense and artificial intelligence was also discussed. The two countries reaffirmed their commitment to promising economic cooperation through the implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Area, while examining opportunities in the trade, investment and tourism sectors. They stressed the need for an effective monitoring mechanisms and the creation of a technical committee for priority areas. Algiers and Addis Ababa exchanged views on regional and international issues, stressing the importance of coordination in the fight against terrorism, in financing and human trafficking. They also expressed concern at the persistent conflicts in Africa and reaffirmed their support for the UN resolutions on decolonization, notably with regard to Western Sahara.
In this connection, Algeria and Ethiopia reaffirmed in Addis Ababa their support for the right of the people of Western Sahara to self-determination. Earlier, he had talks in Addis Ababa with the Minister of Foreign Affairs and Development Cooperation of the Republic of Burundi, Albert Chiringiro. The meeting between the two parties took place outside their participation in the 24th extraordinary session of the Executive Council of the African Union. During the talk, the two sides discussed the topics on the Executive Council's agenda and examined the existing bilateral relations of cooperation as well as the ways and means of promoting them. The Secretary of State to the State Minister of Foreign Affairs in charge of the national community abroad, Mr. Sofiane Chahib, has received here in Algiers a delegation from the Mauritania-Algeria Parliamentary Friendship Group led by its president, Mr. Da Shuhaib. Ms. Houcharfi has the details.
The meeting provided an opportunity to review the state of brotherly and cooperative relations between Algeria and Mauritania in their historical, diplomatic, political, parliamentary, religious and cultural dimensions, and to discuss ways to further strengthen and develop them in line with the shared will of the two countries' leaders, Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune and his brother, Mr. Mohammed Ould Sheikh El Ghazouani. On the occasion, both parties welcomed the positive development of bilateral relations, particularly in the economic field, in light of the opening of the border post and the maritime link between the two countries, as well as the project to build the Tindouf-Zouaret road. In this regard, both sides emphasized the need to continue working to develop trade exchanges and enhance the sharing of expertise between the two countries.
A scientific forum is being held here in Algiers at the Abdelatif Rahel International Conference Center with the participation of the Interior Minister, Mr. Brahim Marred, in collaboration with the Naifera University of Security Sciences and the International Organization for Migration. The details with Jemison Mani.
The Interior Minister, Mr. Brahim Marred, has said that Algeria had adopted a comprehensive and multidimensional approach to combating the smuggling of migrants and trafficking in persons while adapting its mechanisms to the evolution of criminal methods associated with this scourge.
In line with the high instructions of the President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune, and in recognition of the importance of the challenges posed by this phenomenon, Algeria has in recent years adopted a comprehensive and integrated approach that is multi-dimensional, legal, security, operational, and humanitarian. This approach has been developed in coordination with all relevant stakeholders, and continuous efforts are being made to strengthen and enhance its mechanisms in line with the evolving methods of crimes related to this issue. As part of these efforts, public authorities have worked to establish an updated and comprehensive legal framework that aligns with international standards to combat these transnational crimes. It is also based on strict legislations that enable security and judicial authorities to effectively combat smuggling and human trafficking networks while safeguarding the individual rights and dignity.
For his part, the regional director of the International Organization for Migration for the Middle East and North Africa, Bilbaisi, has said that the fight against illegal migration requires collective action and a synergy of efforts from all states, organizations and civil society. Addressing the opening of the Scientific Forum on Migration, Mr. Bilbaisi said that human trafficking and the smuggling of migrants are cross-border crimes whose repercussions are not limited to a particular geographical area but affect millions of people around the world. He pointed out that one of the challenges in developing responses to this scourge and assessing its impact is the lack of reliable and accurate information available to decision makers.
You're still listening to Radio Algeria International. Algeria has successfully secured a seat at the African Union Peace and Security Council for a 3-year term during elections held in the Ethiopian capital, Addis Ababa, as part of the 24th extraordinary session of the Executive Council of the Pan-African Organization. Algeria sealed the vote after winning the trust of 34 African countries in the third round of elections, compared to 15 votes for Libya. Algeria's success is a recognition of its role and position under the leadership of President Abdelmajid Tebboune in promoting peace and restoring security on the African continent. The United Nations Security Council has held a closed-door meeting on the developments in the situation in Western Sahara, occupied by Morocco since 1975. During the meeting, the UN Secretary-General's Special Representative for Western Sahara and head of the United Nations Mission for the referendum in Western Sahara, MINURSO, Alexander Ivanko, and the UN Secretary-General's personal envoy, Staffan de Mistura, briefed the UN Security Council members. As a reminder, UN envoy Staffan de Mistura toured the region last week, where he met with the two parties to the conflict, the Kingdom of Morocco and the Polisario Front, and discussed the reality and prospects of the UN-sponsored peace process in Africa's last colony. During his tour, Staffan de Mistura also visited Mauritania and Algeria, two observer countries in the UN-led process. The Ministry of Energy, Mines and Renewable Energies has launched the Takati Plus project in cooperation with the European Union delegation to Algeria and the Federal Republic of Germany through the German Agency for International Cooperation. More details in this report by Yasia Bakar.
The launching ceremony was attended by the Secretary of State for Renewable Energy, along with the Ambassador of the European Union delegation to Algeria and the Ambassador of Germany. The Takati Plus project is a pivotal milestone in partnership between Algeria and its European partners. It aims to accelerate the deployment of renewable energy and the development of green hydrogen, as well as enhance energy efficiency, particularly in energy-intensive sectors. The Ambassador of Germany to Algeria said the energy transition is a field through which Algeria and Germany aim to bring a new impetus to their clean energy relations.
The signing of the contract of the implementation of the co-financing of Takati Plus project is more than an administrative commitment or a technical milestone, but it also reflects a political will and a common vision for a lasting energy future and a sincere friendship between our nations, which are united by history, challenges and ambitions. Algeria is a strategic partner for Germany. Our relations are based on mutual respect, political dialogue and economic cooperation concretizes today in a future-oriented axis. The energy transition is a field through which our two countries can reinvent a resilient, decarbonized and equitable development model.
It's worth noting that Takati Plus is a project co-funded by the European Union and the Federal Republic of Germany and implemented in cooperation between the Ministry of Energy, Mines and Renewable Energies and the German Agency for International Cooperation.
The chairperson of the African Union Commission, Mahmoud Ali Youssef, has expressed his deep concern at the escalation of violence in Sudan, particularly in the North Darfur region, calling for an immediate and unconditional cessation of hostilities. More details in this report by Masoud Sharfi.
Mr. Youssef deplored the deteriorating situation in the country, citing reports of intensified attacks by the Rapid Support Paramilitary Forces (RSF) in El Fasher, including deadly assaults on the Zamzam and Abu Shouk displacement camps. He said that these attacks have resulted in the deaths of civilians, including children and humanitarian workers, rejecting the violence as a grave violation of international humanitarian law and human rights. He called for an immediate and unconditional end to the fighting and urged the paramilitary forces to lift the blockade and allow unimpeded humanitarian access. The African Union reiterated the importance of de-escalating the conflict in Sudan, urging all involved parties to exercise maximum restraint and avoid action that could further inflame tensions. It underscored the protecting civilians and restoring peace must be immediate priorities, highlighting the need to create a peaceful environment conducive to a long-term stability and development, and stressing that the well-being of the Sudanese people should remain the foremost concern. Earlier, the United Nations Children's Fund, UNICEF, has warned that 2 years of conflict in Sudan have devastated millions of children's lives, with grave rights violations rising by 1,000%. Child casualties jumped from 150 in 2022 to over 2,700 in 2023-2024, while attacks on schools and hospitals soared. Over 15 million children now need humanitarian aid. UNICEF Executive Director Catherine Russell has called Sudan the world's worst humanitarian crisis, urging for urgent access, funding, and an end to the war, which has killed tens of thousands and displaced 13 million. With famine spreading and flooding looming, 462,000 children face severe malnutrition. The regional director of the East and Horn of Africa and the Great Lakes at the UN Refugee Agency, Mamadou Diane Blade, highlighted urgent humanitarian needs in South Sudan and nearby countries, condemning atrocities in Darfur and warning of mass displacement and calling for peace and immediate ceasefire.
2 years after the brutal conflict started in Sudan, that have had a very negative impact on millions of people, and I can speak a bit more about them later. You all have seen the Secretary General's own statement following the atrocities that have happened in Zamzam displacement site, as well as Abu Shuk near the city of El Fasher, all of them in Darfur. These are just unacceptable events that are happening. Another example of the massive violations of human rights that have been happening in Sudan and that have been forcing close to 9 million people, Sudanese, to be internally displaced, and close to 4 million refugees going into neighboring countries. Close to 2 years ago, I spoke to you about this situation, and we are already warning the international community about these massive violations, calling for this situation to find peace, ceasefire.
In this context, on the eve of the conference in London on the African country, devastated by 2 years of conflict, Germany announced that it would provide an additional 125 million euros in humanitarian aid for Sudan, which it described as the greatest humanitarian catastrophe of our time.
As the humanitarian situation in Gaza worsens day by day, the Israeli army pursued its attacks on the territory's northern and southern parts, killing several Palestinians. According to the news agency Wafa, at least 5 Palestinians were killed and several others wounded in airstrikes carried out today by the Israeli army against El Mawasi, west of the southern town of Khan Yunis, as well as Beit Lahia in the northern part of the enclave. This came as the EU Commissioner in charge of the handling of crisis, Hajj al-Habib, affirmed that the ban imposed by the Israeli occupying authorities on humanitarian aid had caused a humanitarian crisis in Gaza. In a statement made before the EU Foreign Ministers' meeting in Luxembourg, she urged for the enforcement of a ceasefire in Gaza to allow for the entry of aid, underlining that there were urgent priorities in Gaza at a time when the Israeli army pursued its genocide against the Palestinians. In a similar move, the UN Secretary-General spokesman Stéphane Dujarric insisted on the importance of resuming the humanitarian aid deliveries to the distressed population in the Gaza Strip.
The Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs warns that the humanitarian situation is now likely to be the worst it has been in the 18 months since the outbreak of hostilities. It has now been a month and a half since any supplies were allowed through the crossings into Gaza, by far the longest such halt to date. Humanitarian aid should be above any sort of political decisions, and I think there have been Security Council resolutions, and I think we've been very clear on the fact that humanitarian aid should be freely accessible to all who need it. Israel has responsibilities under international law as the occupying power to adequately provide basic services and humanitarian aid to the people of Gaza. That is not happening. We will point out the situations, the violations of, we feel, is international law.
That was the UN Secretary General spokesman Stéphane Dujarric. That's it for today's news bulletin. I invite you to listen to our weekly health magazine program by my colleague Mohamed Khatil. Stay tuned on Radio Algeria International.
Hello and welcome to this new edition of your weekly program, The Health Magazine, devoted this time to one of the